Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we work on building a SaaS app, a Django app in this case. We're going to continue on a project that I've been working on. This is now part 8 of this series on Journey Inbox. It's a journaling service that's going to use email as the primary interface. We're spending a lot of time staring at SendGrid documentation and doing other stuff like that. But right now we're in the process of getting this service ready to launch. There's a lot of stuff it won't have in it, but we want to get something out there that is minimally viable so that I can start using it and expanding on it from there. So that's the plan. We're going to go through some portion of this launch milestone that I've developed, and we'll just dig into some coding. You're welcome to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what the stream is for. Try and keep it focused to those topics. Sometimes we diverge a little bit. I get questions about my Vim setup and all that kind of stuff, but that's usually what I'm here for. Eric, welcome. Hopefully, if you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll just get to it. I got some cleanup things that we have to do first before we actually get to this checklist. So let's start from the top. And one item, oh, you're welcome, Eric. One item is right here. And oops, apparently we have an update that is happening here. But I pushed a change last week and didn't realize that there's some stuff I got wrong. So if you recall from last week, we did some setting changes. We added some stuff to our environment and some new configuration. And what I failed to do to account for is that on GitHub side, we need to have some of these settings set, because the settings file in this Python app, this Django app, are expecting these things to exist as part of the environment. So our very first thing to do is actually go back and clean this up and make sure that we have accounted for whatever settings we added. So I got to check, this is where it started failing. I don't remember if I added more stuff in here. So we need to check these two commits and make sure that they are working. And then we can go back to that other PR that was there and check on it as well. So we are up to date here with the local code. Let's go look at, looks like both of these have settings that we need to touch. So we can check out this URL first and do a git show on that, see what we forgot. So we've got this email send reply to field, and we have set that, and we made that one a mandatory field. I'll have more to say on that maybe this evening, but we'll go ahead and set it for now. So coming back over to the actual code editor, we're going to go to the GitHub file, and we're going to go to the CI setup that we've got here. Up at the top here is where we're able to set environments that apply to all of the steps. So this is where we need to put this stuff. So we want to set email SendGrid reply to. We'll put it alphabetically. Email SendGrid reply to. And what this will do is make this environment variable available to CI. And I think I can take the default that we had up here, reply to fake sendgrid.com. Sure, let's not use the same thing. Reply to at fake sendgrid.com. All right, that takes care of that one. But there were two. So let's go back and look at our log again. There were two commit changes we made. And what did we put in this one? So git show is a handy way. So I guess maybe I should explain. So I have some aliases. So glg is a shorthand for git log stat, which goes directly into my terminal's pager. So if I type glg, I'm looking at the commit log for my main branch. At this point, I can copy this commit SHA. There are other ways you could do this with that wouldn't involve doing copy paste with this mouse selection. You could do git with rev parse and all that sort of stuff. But I like to do this because I like to see the context of what I'm actually looking at. It's for example, it's what helped me informed me that there was actually two things that had environment modifications. So I find it useful for that way, but to each their own. So then from there we can do git show, and then we paste in the SHA of the git commit that we did, and it gives us the actual diff for what we changed. So we've got two things here that we need to add. We need Sentry enable to be off, and we want to set a Sentry DSN. Both of those things are required attributes. So let's do that. So we'll go to after the secret key, we'll type Sentry enabled, and we'll make sure that Sentry is off. We don't need that running during CI, and we need a value here just because the settings are going to look for that, but it can be a dummy value, or should be able to be a dummy value. So we'll use the same thing of DSN example. So that should get us back, whoops, if I type it correctly, Sentry DSN. That should get us back to a working CI setup. Yeah, thanks Eric, appreciate that. So we've got 3 variables that we're missing, and then we can say add missing environment variables for CI, and we'll push up the change. My CI setup is only taking a minute or 2, so this should go pretty quickly. And then we might need to do an update on, or a rebuild on that other PR because, how would I want to do that? The other PR is like out of date now, and I could check out the PR and merge main back into it because it's going to be behind. And so if I just do a CI build job on it, it's not going to actually fix anything. But it's not a Dependabot PR. With a Dependabot PR, so there's Dependabot for updating packages, but this is pre-commit, which is a different system. With Dependabot, you can actually say something like you can put as a comment and say at Dependabot, and then you add the word rebase. And Dependabot will take that as a signal that it knows it needs to go and update the PR based off of whatever the latest head commit is. We don't have that same affordance with pre-commit CI, so it's a little bit finicky when doing that. Eric, you have a question about solo developing. Fire away whenever you're ready. So we'll check on this. Let's see, it hasn't quite bombed out yet, but right now it's just installing packages, but this does not, I mean, the test suite right now is so short that we should see some success here pretty quickly if we got it right. And I think it would have already blown up in our faces. Yep. All right, cool. So we fixed it. Good question, Eric. Do I use a PR even if I'm the only developer in the project? It depends. And that's the weaselly answer, so I'll give more detail. Most of the time, no. Like, especially if I'm doing this here on stream, you'll see me, I'll do kind of a cursory, not a cursory, I will, since I'm a solo developer, there are things that I want to check on every commit. I want to review my code, make sure I didn't put any stupid stuff in there like print statements, and there's probably pre-commit checks that I could add that could make me forget about that stuff, but I still like to look at the code changes that I made. Then I like to run my test tools to make sure that I still have coverage. And one of the things I've said on many of these streams is that importantly for my projects, the way I get peace of mind personally is by making sure that every line of code is tested. Now, it doesn't mean I'm doing 100% branch coverage or, there's varying degrees of it, but I at least want to know that my statements are touched so that if I have a syntax error or something like that, it's going to get caught. Although my editors are pretty good about catching this. So I've got layers and layers of tools that are all there to help protect me from making mistakes on my project and committing bad code. When I'm doing a more involved feature that I know, or here's a scenario. Let's say that I'm doing a feature and I thought it was going to be a smaller feature. And as I got through it, I realized, oh man, there's a bunch more stuff in here than I realized. At that point, I will create a branch in Git and then start using that branch and start committing to it. And for the easiest flow, I could go into from the command line and go back to my main branch and directly merge in the branch that I just worked on and push it back up. That's one flow. But honestly, the reason that I create so my process is to create a PR at that point. And the reason I create a PR is just because that's at that stage where I have a bunch of commits, I find viewing the Git diff to be easier on the web interface, because my memory between a bunch of commits might be spread over a few days. So I want to see the total picture, and I don't want to figure out the right syntax to like diff it against main. I mean, I'm sure it's not hard, but it's just easier flow for me to create this. Especially, I've got some command line tools. I've got one here called, well, it might not be installed on this machine because I haven't had that process, but I do have a tool called Hub that I normally have installed that will allow me to create a pull request like directly from the command line. So it's really easy to create the pull request and then look at it. So that's my stance on solo stuff in that way. We're now back to a working state, so that's good. This PR has a couple tiny changes in it. I think that pre-commit runs every week, so I think what I'll do is I'll just let this sit here. We don't need to update this right now. It's not really necessary for us to get done. And then the next time they update it, should pass the test. Okay, so let's actually look then at the issues we have to get through. So if we go to the issue list, last time I created this launch milestone, which is a set of things that I want to do before making the site live. And the reason I included this set is it's either A, directly related to deployment and like making deployment robust, or B, it has to do with like modeling stuff and state changes to the models that would be annoying to do in a migration. Like they could be done, but just it would be irritating to handle. So I think the first one that I want to tackle is actually this one right here, account history. And the idea with this account history thing, so I created this as a reminder. If you hadn't seen this before, we can look. We've got an accounts app, and in it we have a couple of models. One is the user model. That is what's used for user auth. So when you log in, it's all, and you're using Django all auth. It's interacting with this user model that comes from Django. This account model is a creation of my own. And this is going to be a software as a service that is a pay service. So we have to keep track of state, and we're going to be charging people money, and we need to make sure that if they have signed up, they're in one of these different states. Their account is anyway. But what is absent here is the ability to track that state over time, and if there were ever problems with somebody's account and I needed to figure out, it started out in this status and here on this date it changed to this status, and prove to them of like why it changed, I want to have that information. So there are tools that you can use, third-party packages, that will give you access to that history information. And I think they have different strategies for where to store that information, because it's extra data that is not going to be naturally stored in any particular database table. So they handle this in different ways. The one I have used in the past is called django-simple-history. So let's take a look at Django packages. I don't know the exact URL, so .org, okay. Didn't want to just type in random stuff and then end up in weird places. So we'll take a quick peek at django-simple-history. And the reason I'm coming to it from this way is I want to see, you can see it's a popular package, and I trust this package, but I did see recently a reference to another tool that might be more popular than Simple History. Although, Trey Hunter is still releasing this, or whoever is maintaining the project is still releasing it. So let's look over here and go to the comparison grid, and part of why I'm here is to educate myself, but also to show you how Django Packages works. Django Packages is a really cool site that allows you to look at popular packages in the Django ecosystem for a number of different categories, and they're all up here, and you can scroll through them and you can filter on them. So if you've never used Django Packages before, it's a great tool to check into. So they've got these comparison grids. And I think the category that I'm interested in is model auditing and history. I want to see if there are other, and there are, look at this. This is the one that I'm not familiar with. So it's called Django Reversion. It's got a good number of stars and seems to be quite healthy. So let's take a look. I'm curious what's in this thing, and what I want to do. The reason to do this exploration is to educate, but also there are aspects about simple history that aren't my favorite. I'll put it that way. There are things that it does. Well, I'll just name it. Very specifically, when you're using django-simple-history, you take your model and you add this history manager to it, and there's a little tiny bit of configuration. And what happens within that special model manager is it creates another Django model that's kind of hidden from you, and it's historical or history. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's historical, and then whatever your model name is. So if we have the account model, for instance, it would create this other historical account model. And that historical account model is going to be the database table that stores all the state changes that I was talking about. And it stores that stuff as, I believe under the covers, it's like stored as JSON data, saying like, here's what it was at this point in time. We changed this field from this value to this value, or maybe it just stores the new value. I don't know. But that's how it works, so that when you're interacting with it, you want to go look at the past history. What it's really doing under the covers is looking at that other database table to pull out that information and give you that historical record. I've found that the historical stuff, it's fine. It's just not my favorite. So if Django Reversion does this in a different way, I'd be interested to see what they're about. So let's see what the documentation says for Django Reversion. I'm going to open it up here, and we'll read through it and see what we can learn. So Django Reversion is an extension to Django that provides version control for model instances. Great, so far so good. Rollback to any point, recover deleted model instances. Oh, that might be interesting. So maybe there's a soft delete feature, and I think I was even talking about that for one of our issues. So maybe this would provide that functionality that we want. Looks like it's pretty easy to add, and it must have some migrations that come along with it. Not sure what those are, but we would see them in time. Let's keep digging. So you can do some stuff to register with the Django admin. It's got its own special admin, fine. There's an API. Common problems with installation. Why is that? Why is common problems listed so early? That's kind of strange. Django Reversion stores the versions of a model as JSON. All right, sounds like simple history. If a model changes, the migrations are not applied to the stored JSON. Therefore, it can happen that an old version can no longer be restored. Okay. Interesting. All right, some other stuff. I don't need to look at that changelog right now, but now this is curious. It looks like they haven't released a new version, at least in the changelog, since 2022, but that didn't seem to match up with what was shown over here. So maybe they stopped using this changelog. 5.04, last updated in May. Well, 5.04, maybe that was the last official release, but they've had code commits or something. So that's kind of strange. That's a sort of a red flag to me that there are changes to this, but they haven't pushed out a new release in 8 months, 9 months. All right, and I'm talking through this to kind of give you my assessment for how I think about a software project, especially if I'm going to incorporate it into my own. Let's see, it's BSD, so that's a fine license. John, you noticed that the Django packages site in the chart that history storage was different in each. Yeah. So it might have a better mechanism for storing history, or maybe it's attaches it. It could be that it attaches it directly to the table, so there's like not multiple tables that you're going through. That's one way that I'm wondering if it differentiates itself. So I'm trying to figure that out. I'm not going to put too much stock in the fact that the changelog is super old, or that there hasn't been a release in 8 months. Maybe there hasn't been anything that has risen to the level of feeling like there should be a release. There's an admin integration, which we already saw. Okay, bunch of stuff there. Management commands. Create initial revisions. Whoa. Create an initial revision for all registered models in your... Oh, wow. So this, maybe this take a totally different strategy where you don't attach it to... I'm so confused. I'm confused. Well, I'll keep reading. It might... So the way I'm interpreting this right now is that it might be able to attach history to every model, which I don't know that I would want that. There's a table for the reversion package and model for the simple package. Oh, okay. So revision keeps all the history in a singular table, perhaps, or a small couple of tables, and then like denormalize or keeps track of all the type information in that single table. Okay. That could be nice, actually. Because as I said, these historical models, you get a bunch of them. And, I'm trying to, let's think through the ramifications of, I don't know that I have enough data for this app, but I could see if you were in an app with a huge amount of data and you needed a history, like this historical table could get gigantic if it has a lot of models all in the same place. For large databases, this command can take a long time to run. Delete revisions. Yeah, see, this is, they only keep a certain number of days, otherwise it's unbounded. Huh. That's a little scary. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, okay, okay. This is cool. So use Django reversion API to build version controlled apps. Now look, we've got this is the overall API. So you go into your model and you have to register it with a decorator. All right, cool. Using the admin integration, model registration is automatic. Oh, wow, that's even more cool. You're using Django reversion in a management command, make sure you call auto discover. Huh. Whenever you register a model with Django reversion, run create initial revisions. What if it's a new model? Does that include a new model? That'd be kind of annoying. Like if every time I wanted to add something historical, I had to do that. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's talk about creating revisions. So if you want to create new ones, that's interesting. I think django-simple-history just works by save. Anytime you save anything, it creates a new thing. So there's not this explicit mechanism here. Loading, revision, reverting, restoring deleted. I don't know how they would do that. How would you restore? How do they restore the same primary key? That's weird. Like, because if you delete in your, let's say, unless it's a soft delete, which in case I would understand this, but if it wasn't a soft delete, like if you're actually deleting it from your database table, a restore is going to give it a different ID because that's a auto incrementing ID feature of the database. So that's an unusual thing to me. My gut is telling me after reading through, like, this is cool. Like, I'm not going to knock it, but My gut is telling me that I should stick with simple history because I think I'm comfortable with it already. There's a bunch of edges here that I'm not so sure about. Pretty sizable API. And simple history has worked well for me. So I just wanted to be thorough before, because somebody mentioned this to me and they were like, and I think I saw the number of stars and stuff. I was like, wow, this one's really popular. So I wanted to give it a good shot here. Let's finish it off, make sure we're understanding this. Oh, yeah, wrap every request in a revision. This is feeling pretty invasive. Okay. No knock on anybody who uses Django reversion. I'm just going to go with the one that I feel more comfortable with. So let's look back at simple history and get this set up. And I'll walk you through this process. And Trey does a lot of good stuff for Python community, although it looks like maybe it's been moved. Maybe he's moved on from this project. And so this group, when you see Jazz Band as the GitHub owner, Jazz Band is a group of maintainers that have kind of taken on popular packages that exist in the Django ecosystem, where the original maintainer, maybe didn't have time to maintain it anymore. So it's kind of an entourage that does stuff to kind of keep projects going because they're valuable, and then everybody works on it as a collective. Pretty cool group. Grateful for what they do. So let's look at installing simple history and getting it set up for the account model. So let's start with going over to our requirements.include file. And let's go to PyPI, because I don't know the latest version, and find Django simple history. We're at 330. Okay, so it goes right here. Django simple history equal 3.3.0. And we'll come over here and do a pip compile on our requirements file. And then we can do a pip install, but hold on, C flags. Okay. So now we've got simple history installed, and then we've added to the requirements file. So that's that piece. I don't think we need PyPI anymore. Let's look back here. So we need to add this to our installed apps. It is a Django app. Come over to our settings file, and we'll drop it into our third-party section here, which is, I'm including all of these in order. So this is the Django stuff, third-party stuff, and then the stuff that is first-party, which is the journal apps. So right here, I'm going to add simple history, like so. And the historical models can track who made each change. To populate the history user automatically, you can add the history request middleware. If you do not want to use the middleware, you can explicitly indicate the user making the change using, did I use the, I wonder if I use this for homeschool. So let's go look at homeschool for a second and see. Looks like I did not include the middleware here. Probably figured I didn't need it. It's not a required thing. And most of the time with these like if I'm thinking about this, how many models do I need to actually have history? So far, the only one I can think of is the account. Maybe there'll be something else in the future. So it's not like I have a strong need to have every historical account be checked by a piece of middleware. And so the way I'm thinking through this is middleware has a cost. And in fact, let's go to my website, and I've got a whole book that you can read about Django stuff. It's called Understand Django. And I talk about middleware. So if you don't really understand middleware, we can take a little look at a diagram that I sort of built out. So here's the diagram. The way middleware works is like layers here. And it's kind of like layers in an onion sort of concept, but at the very middle of this process is the actual view function, your code that you're writing in your system. And so when a request comes in, the first thing it does is it goes into the middleware stack, and it's going through each middleware, gets its chance to do some kind of processing, and it keeps going and going and going until it gets to your view function, and the view function does its work, and then coming out the other side, the middleware has a chance on the response to go as well. So it has this kind of flow that it goes through all this middleware. What that means in practice is that the middleware that you have needs to be fast. Every piece of middleware you add is a global penalty for your entire site. So as I'm thinking through this documentation, I'm asking myself, do I want another function call, which is what this amounts to, in this chain of middleware to go through this history stuff? And since I'm only using this for one model, it doesn't really make sense to me to include this middleware. That's why I'm not going to include it. Sam, your question, let me take a look. You create an app or use middleware? I'm not fully sure I'm following the question, Sam, so maybe you can phrase that a little differently. With Simple History, we're not creating so Simple History is a Django app that includes some middleware, and so there's layers to this. So one part of Simple History is that it needs to hook into the ORM. And in order to do that, it has to be a registered Django app for reasons that we're not going to get into. The middleware is something else that is included with the Simple History project that you can use, and it's just some code that you're saying, I want to make sure that this runs through all of my request response cycle. If that doesn't address your question, Sam, let me know, and I'll try and dig into that more. Okay, so now we've got the basic configuration going, and we're ready to go further with this, where we can say where we need to add stuff to it. So the thing we have to add is we have to come in here and say from simplehistory.models import historical records and set it as this history attribute. So this is what's going to make the model react to historical stuff. So let's do that. Let's go over here and say from simple history. I need to restart my LSP because it doesn't recognize simple history. .models import, what was it? History records, historical records. Okay, let's restart the LSP. And then now down here, I'm going to put this after the account, the objects manager. So we say history as the attribute, and then add this historical records thing onto it. So that's enough for simple history to go, okay, you want this account thing to be different. We're not worried about tracking history for a third-party model, so not too worried about that right now. We do, this is where you're going to see that it's going to make that historical thing. And the thing that comes along with this is that every time you make a migration, so remember over in the reversion stuff, it said, like it's possible that you could lose columns and that you could have stuff that no longer matches what exists. I think maybe Simple History might manage that better by having basically a table that mirrors your actual model table. So if you add columns to the model, it's going to add columns to the history model too. If you remove stuff, it's going to remove stuff. So there's that aspect as well. So we've got our new historical records thing here. We don't have to set any kind of special manager. We don't have to set any kind of special thing there. There might be some stuff that we could do for the admin interface if we wanted to have a cooler admin integration. I don't know that we'll need that right away. So let's go over here and let's say manage, make migrations, see what it makes for us. So it added a new accounts thing, this historical account. Let's go take a look at a quick peek at it. Go up and look in the migrations directory. And so we've got our account model here, which is the thing we've already added, the status and the user. It's really not much. And then I'm going to save this and let Black reformat it. And so you see the same fields. You see the status and you see, should see the, yeah, here's the foreign key for the user. But then there's all these history versions of it. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know a lot of what simple history is doing with these attributes, but I assume that it's storing a row for each change. So maybe it's not the most efficient system for keeping track of this, but that's how it goes. And so every time I add a change now, if I add a new field, it's going to also update the historical account table as well. Okay, so that gets us the account history stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we need to add. Might be limited to that. Let's keep going. We're not in existing projects. We don't have to populate anything. So by adding historical records, you automatically start tracking the create, update, or delete that occurs. Yep, it's showing like other tables that are created. And it walks you through like, what are we doing? So that's kind of nice. Let's keep going. So it talks about later, if you wanted to look at the history, how you do that. So question from John here, or a comment. I don't feel that the user model needs history. Maybe. I don't know. And there's like, what are the what I'm walking through here is like, what use cases do I really have for history right now? And I need to be able to administer the site and like tell people, if anybody has any questions about their account status, I want to have a record of like, well, this is when it changed. Let me go look back at the Stripe webhook that would have fired to cause this change, or this is when your account started, and here's when the trial date officially ended in case there are any questions about that. So that's why I really want the account history. For user, what are the attributes on user? The user has an email attribute that will be for, since we integrated with Django all auth and chose to use that form of login, that's going to be the primary attribute that we really care about from the user. It's going to have the password hash, which I don't need any history for. It has date joined, but that's a one-time field. And there are, there's like first and last name stuff, but I'm not going to expose that in the app. So those are the attributes that I know exist on user off the top of my head, and I can't find any like strong use case for them. So I think I will probably not put history on the user right now. That's my thinking. So it tells us how you can look through the history and cycle through this if you want. If we needed programmatic access to that history, or if there's some day where I wanted to have a page that showed that to the user, I can't imagine that being super interesting, but who knows? Never know. And different ways that you can use this. So this is really all I really care about is having it from the admin perspective. I'm not making something that is going to incorporate history as like a core element of the app. But it's cool to know that Simple History has these features, just like Reversion had a bunch of features too. So if you have some more important need for your app to incorporate historical time looking aspects of it, definitely dig into this, but I'm not going to spend too much time here. Let's look at the admin and we'll see what we can see. Looks like to allow viewing previous model versions of the Django, inherit from the simple history admin when registering your model. Okay. So that's about as simple as it comes, which is cool. Okay, let's go do that. We have pretty trivial change. We go to accounts and we look at the admin. Oh, I didn't even register the account. Okay. All right. Shall we? Yeah, let's do a regular admin and then see if we can see the user admin or the simple history admin stuff. That might be interesting. So first thing we need is to have a new class, which we will call account admin. I don't know why I blanked on that for a minute. And it's going to inherit from the model admin. Whoops. And right now, we don't need to do anything. We'll just make that pass. And we do have to register it in order for it to be seen. So we should be able to do admin register. And then we're going to need the account model. We'll import that from here. Okay. So this is enough to get us a basic admin, which is wild. It's a very powerful feature of Django. If you want to be able to have a CRUD interface and you don't want to think at all, like this is all you have to do is 3 lines of code, which is pretty amazing. Let's get the web server running. While that's getting booted up, I never remember the password, so okay, we're going to log in. If it's not already logged in, create horse is the password. Let's go to port 5000. We want to go to the admin. So the username was Matt and create horse. Okay, neat. A moment ago, if before I had saved this thing, you wouldn't have seen this line. It wouldn't have been here registered. Okay, we haven't not run our migrations on our local database, so it's complaining that there's stuff missing. Makes sense. Let's migrate to actually apply the change of the historical account to here. And we can now return. Let's fire that up again. And click through here again. Now we don't have an account yet because I think when I started with this super user, we had not created the account model yet. So let's make one. And we'll connect it to the super user and put it in the exempt state. Sure, why not? Now, even doing this might be creating history because we've already connected that correctly. But you can see here, there's no stuff that would indicate that. And if we click through, there's no, well, there's this history, but this is a Django thing. There's a Django admin log that comes with it, but it's really just, what did you do? Like, the user Matt added this thing. And it has some basic functionality, but it's not very deep. So let's go now return to our admin page and make our modifications. So we want to bring in from simple history admin, import simple history admin, and change out the thing that its subclass is from to use the simple history admin. I think that should be enough. Still got to figure out why the web server does not seem to refresh on the Python file changes. It's annoying. Hasn't been a big enough issue to like go fix it yet though. So now if we refresh this page, let's see what we get. Whoops, I refreshed the chat. Wrong box. Well, I don't see anything immediately obvious. but maybe the history button is different. Yeah, okay. Look at it. It changed here. This is definitely a lot more information. We don't have it to its change by because we haven't hooked that up. We could. I don't really care though. So perhaps let's try switching this around to like trialing. See what happens here. Go back to here. Click the history. Ooh, cool. We've got 2 versions of this now. We can look at this one. Press the revert button to revert. Oh, okay, so that's a new feature. Let's revert. And let's see. Did it revert? Previously it was an exempt, right? I don't know. Okay, we can see the different states, which is really what I care about. So I'm not going to be messing with reverting and changing people's account. I just want to poke at it. So this is the thing that I would use if I needed to go reconcile somebody's account and figure out, hey, here's your status stuff. Here's when things changed. That's probably the tools I would use. Or, it's possible. Unlikely. Never mind. So that may be all we need to do for this edition. We have all of the set of changes. Let's review the change set. So we added an admin page for the account. We could make it way better. Right now it's pretty crappy, honestly. It doesn't mention like the user email, so I don't know whose account is whose, but that's not my priority right now. I really just want to make sure that this exists so that when we go live, that this migration will go out right away. Eric, I'd be happy to answer that question. Or Eric's looking for an opinion about Tailwind CSS. Okay, using a comparison to Bootstrap. Sure. Let me commit this, and then I'll chat about that, because I'm not going to get to any CSS stuff today, so I might as well chat on it now. This will, hold on. Let's make sure that it passes the test suite. None of this should change. Yep. So let's commit this code. Add history to account model. And that fixes, what's the number? 29. Push that up. So Eric, Tailwind. Yeah, I have used it on my projects. I'm a fan. Just state that up front. And the question that you have seems to center around, should I use Tailwind? Should I use Bootstrap? And I think the answer I'd give to you on that, or maybe just thinking, the ways to think about it, would be, what do you need your site to do? Bootstrap is great for productivity. Like if you need a functional UI from people who have thought about the common widgets that appear on the web, and you're comfortable with the constraints of those widgets and setting up that HTML that way, that can be really, really useful. In fact, you can even take it one step farther. Let's go back to Django packages for a minute. Like if you really need to get stuff done, there is a package that you might want to use or consider using called Django Crispy Forms. I find that Django Crispy Forms have a lot of constraints, but maybe those constraints are very freeing, where you essentially tell Django to render a form, like you put in a form into your view context and you call render on it. and it gets all that stuff done. And from what I've heard, Bootstrap fits into this like super well. So you plug it in, you get your form, boom, here's that stuff. And if you're content with the attributes that it creates and the style of forms that it creates, rock on. Like, you probably saved yourself a bunch of time. Although I did just see just now, and maybe I need to go investigate, there's a crispy Tailwind package. That's interesting. I don't really know what that means, because it seems like these things need to be customizable, because I assume you have some notion of what Tailwind's about. And for those that don't, Tailwind is a CSS framework where instead of having a class like, say, button, like as Bootstrap might have for styling a button, you instead get the pieces that you would build, like rounded corner and the color and all of these attributes that you would set kind of directly on the HTML. So the trade-off with that approach is that you end up putting more of that stuff and customizing that yourself, and it is being a bit more verbose, but it's a very flexible way. And the reason I dig Tailwind is that I don't have to create separate CSS files anymore, for the most part. Instead, I can use their CSS attributes very quickly and build the kind of things that I want. So I found that powerful. Then, in addition to that, and I haven't tried this yet, so in a recent version of Django, what version? Hold on. Let's see. Django releases. It's got the release notes here. And I'm not going to be able to find this quickly. A not too distant version of Django added some stuff to how templates are rendered, and specifically templates and forms, and gave you more control over the templates that power the default rendering stuff that comes out of Django's form elements, which is really cool. It actually just started using the template system as you would expect, and there are things that you have to include, but other than that, you can really customize it by putting stuff in certain positions and things. It's pretty awesome. So if you did that, you might be able to work that with Tailwind and create common configurations for all your buttons and all of your input fields and labels and stuff like that, and get the look that you're looking for. We might even explore that for this project. I have not tried it, but it sounds like a very promising way to eliminate the duplication that you might otherwise set up. Like, I basically created this kind of stuff myself in my homeschool project to set up all of the form fields and make them kind of generic, and it was fiddly, to say the least. So that's my general feeling on it. Sam, your comment, a package of Django front-end Jinja includes components would be very useful. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see that. So the Django's philosophy for doing templates is a little different from, say, like React or something like that, where you build up a bunch of components and you nest components and that sort of stuff. Django can manage some of that, but it's not strictly designed that way. So it doesn't have the same power that React would for that style. But you can still do some of that stuff. Yeah, I agree, John. Tailwind is great for that speedy development aspect with the utility classes. You're right. But the Bootstrap is a good fit for, like, I need a stock site. I need to get something out fast. And my users don't necessarily care about having a super customized look, because it's gonna, you've seen Tailwind sites before, and you start recognizing them since they're very common. Okay, so let's return to our launch checklist here. Oh, right. You're welcome, Eric. Next thing we've got on this list is Should we allow for soft deletion of users? This was a question that we posed a while ago, back in June. One of the early questions on this. Let me think for a moment. The benefit of soft delete would be that we could keep a user's entries around. So let's say they close their account and they didn't mean to. I'm sure this happens. And so there's two stances we could have. It's like, we're just deleting your data forever, and sorry, you deleted it, or you deleted it when you deleted your account. Or we take this soft delete approach and we hold on to it for some period of time. It might be nice. So I think what I want to offer to users, I would imagine if I took this approach, is a way to explicitly state, no, get my data off now. I'm doing this and I'm making a willful decision. But for everybody else, we might be able to soft delete the user and let the account stick around for some period of time, maybe 180 days or something like that, and then have a cleanup job that kind of comes back through and deletes the accounts for good. So that's a pretty promising idea. So how should we do this? There's probably a bunch of ways. Let's see if there are options. Let's check Django packages again. There might be recommendations for soft delete kind of stuff. Soft. Well, there's one called soft delete that's sounds pretty accurate, but I don't know if it's any good. Or if there are other stuff. Look, a whole comparison grid. Oh, interesting. Look at they list django-simple-history as doing soft delete. Django safe delete. Django PG trigger, soft delete, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's a bunch of these. Not that many though. I also vaguely remember that Django extensions had something like that. Where'd the site go? Django extensions. So there was something in here that was related, like versioning. Soft does not show up. What version? Command extensions. Maybe it's under model extensions. Let's take a look at this. An activator model. Almost sounds like what our account stuff could have been. Title description, timestamp, auto slug. Okay, I thought it was one of these. Maybe it is this one. Let's read. Let me actually read through the docs. It's hard when I'm trying to stream, actually paying attention to reading. So I'm going to pause and be quiet and read this for a moment. Okay, so this could do what we want. We could have, it's got this status attribute that we would add to user, I guess, as like a mix in. And then it would give us a status field, activate date, and deactivate date. But it's kind of It's like binary, right? Like, is that sufficient for soft deletion? Well, what else would I want? It's either you're soft deleted or you're not, right? Okay, pretty viable option. I'm not super interested in introducing another package if I can avoid it. So maybe let's look for the simple history version of this as well, and see why was this listed in the package grid for this feature. Oh, you know what it might be? It might be the thought that we have the historical record, and we can, if you deleted it, we could bring it back in terms of the data that we have for that model. The weakness of that, specifically for the user, is that I have set up the user model to cascade delete, right? So if you have journal entries and you delete the user, it's going to delete those journal entries. So restoring that would be a big pain. So that doesn't feel like a good fit for the way Simple History wants to do that. Let me do a quick search for delete just in case I'm not thinking about it properly. Every time a create, update, or delete occurs on this, a new row is created in the historical table for all that model, including all the fields. Yeah, so this is not going to preserve this. It's going to keep the data, but it's not going to preserve that stuff that is those foreign key relationships. So I don't think it's going to work for us. All right, let me come back here and think if this is the right fit. Activator model. We've got 3: status, activate, date, and deactivate date. So I would assume that it will default to active when you're created. Maybe we can go dig in. Let's go look at the code, actually. It's probably just a abstract model, like it says. So this is something we can definitely see. Let's bring up the source code for this package. Go to the main tree here. Look at this. Where did that live? DB models. Yeah. John, I'm reading your comment, but setting a Boolean field for active or not, and then filter them out later in the views. Yep. So after a time, you set the user, will be then, and by having that deactivate date, that is something that we can react to, right? So if I have a job, like a cleanup job, it can look for any user where deactivate date is, now minus 180 days ago, and then fully delete them using the right manager method. Sorry. So let's take a look. It's starting to feel like this would be the simplest way to achieve this for us, but let's check out the code. So we don't need a timestamp model for this one because we just don't need that. Title, description. So here's the query set that it provides. It provides an active and inactive, which is what I would want. Or I guess, well, never mind. Well, this would be a part of the cleanup process using that inactive query. We've got the model manager, uses query set stuff, active, inactive, all good. And here we go. Here's our activator model. Yeah, so that's a good question, John. So I think the way so John's question is about setting the active in the user table to off. Yeah, that's what the delete, if you clicked in this app, if you click close your account and you don't pick the like brutal option that I'm going to give of just like, no, delete my account. I'm serious. But if you click the other version that's going to preserve that data, that's the way I would delete them, is by setting it to inactive. I'm surprised there's not like a method that you call to like actually like close it out. It looks like you have to manually set the deactivate date. It's kind of weird. But this is an abstract model, so it depends on, somebody else needs to set a real model. You can't just have it be by itself. And you can see it's got the activator model manager attached to it. So it's a regular model. It's a regular manager with these extra attributes added to it. And it's going to default to active status, which is what we want. So let's try it and see if it's going to mess with the user stuff. So in the Accounts app, go into the models, and so far we're purely pulling from abstract user. But what we're going to do is come in here and do from Django extensions, DB models, import the activator model. And I think what I should be able to do is do this as a mix-in of the activator model. That may be the extent of this change. Jeffrey B., what are the features tonight? A good question. I am working through our launch milestone. So I've worked on a couple features already. Or actually, this was last week, but I worked on an account history feature. We looked at django-simple-history and how to configure that for doing history tracking on a model. And at the moment, we're trying to look at how to do soft deletion of users. And I'm trying to make sure to get whatever database state is going to be annoying to get later after we've deployed set. So that if we want to have some of these features, that we have some of that data in advance and don't have to go backfill that. So this is one of those ones. And the way I'm chosen to do this is with Django extensions. It seems to have this activator model will be able to do what I think we needed to do for soft deletion. So we have this change. It was this one extension and this mix-in. We'll see. Let me try. Is that a Boolean field? It's essentially a Boolean field. It's two states. There's an active and inactive, active and inactive. So it's effectively a Boolean, but they've implemented it as an integer. So let's try this. Let's do make migrations and see what happens. See if it blows up. And it did not. Cool. Here's an area where is there value in simplifying the migrations table? So this is adding a third thing here to the existing user table. Sorry, I didn't state that very clearly at all. We've got the initial user thing, user migration, that is pulling from abstract stuff and setting all of these fields, first name, last name, super user, all of these access pieces. And that's all going in initial. And we have a secondary one that sets it after. And what I don't know, well, these should set to default. So this is going to act like it will add the data as soon as it can. So it will effectively, if there were any existing user accounts, they would get the status added because it has a default value. You can see here the default value is 1, which is active, and it will set that. And my initial launch to Heroku won't have any of this data, so that should be fine. And we can test this out by running, well, let's do show migrations. Is that it? Is that what it's called? Show migrations is a useful command to see what has and has not been applied. And we're just missing one here. So we should be able to manage migrate, and it ran that state change there. And if we start up the local web server again and return to the admin, which is over here, and go to the accounts, look at the users, and look at this Matt account that I created, then we see all of this stuff. Now, what's missing is those actual new fields, I think. Because what we're doing is we're using Django's own version of the admin page. So it's all of their opinions about what to show and what not to show and the sections to include. So it's actually hiding that information. So maybe we need to do a little bit more work to go look at, because I'm confident now that these fields are in the database table, but they're just not showing up in the admin. So how do we expose those? That's a good question. Let's go see if we can figure out how to customize the Django user admin. djangoproject.com and documentation. And what's the thing that we're actually trying to update here? Look at the admin. It's the user admin. I want to know if you can, how much you can customize this thing. Oh, we'd have to update the fields set, probably. So here's an example where they're just using it as is, and they're registering it. Yeah, this is a model admin, John. I think it's just we can actually, we can go look. Let's see if we can get, I should be able to go to definition on this. Here we are. So the user admin is a model admin that already has all of these things set. And so the challenge here is that they've been very explicit in which pieces to display, not display, so on and so on. So I think if we want to include those new fields, I think what we need to do is come and expand the field sets attribute. As you can see, this is where, like, this stuff maps very cleanly, which makes sense, like that's directing this. So it's got username and password. We've got a field set that has no header, and the fields are this and this, username and password. And we've got a section for personal info, a section for permissions, and a section for important dates. So I think, and then they've got other field sets here. So what we can do is, it's going to look a little hacky, but it should work just fine. Does the docs for the package have the changes? Good question. I assume you mean the Django extensions docs? Maybe. No, it looks like they just give the, well, here's the admin extensions. Maybe there's one that goes with it. Foreign key autocomplete, blah, blah, blah. No. Okay, so we're kind of on our own here. But it's not a big deal. I think what we have to do is go back and right here, well, okay. So we're going to do this. We're going to do as base user admin. And then we're going to set our own class of user admin that's going to inherit from base user admin. And for the moment, I'll do a pass here just to prove that this is right. And then we can do admin register. And this will make sense why I'm doing this in a moment, if it's not clear to you right now. Then we can, let's just comment that out for a second. So if I do this and return to the admin, there should be no change. I shuffled some stuff around, some names around, functionally identical. But the reason I did that is I want to be able to go here and I want to go to field sets as the attribute. And then I want to add in my own field set at the bottom. So we're going to do base user admin.fieldSets, so from the superclass, and we're going to add in a tuple of the new field set. So let's see, what could we call this? We could call this, I don't know, I don't really care, extra. And then it was, what was the format of that? I'm going to get that wrong. So let's go here. Let's go back to that definition again. So you give it the title for that thing is the first part of the tuple, and then the second thing is a dictionary that has the key of fields with a tuple of the values you care about. Good grief. So we need a dictionary with the key of fields with the tuple of stuff that we care about, which would be status, and what were the other two ones? What were they called? The activate date and deactivate date. Okay. Activate date and deactivate date. Close the tuple. Close the dictionary. Operator plus does not support. What are you talking about? Not support for types none. Quiet. Okay, I think that's lying. I think it's inspecting and seeing some type information about the original field set and making some assumptions that are not valid. Turn over here. With any luck, we've got a new field set at the bottom. Oh, boo. Too many values to unpack. Expected 2. All right, got something wrong. So this is a tuple. What did I get wrong? The tuple. And then if you've not seen this before, if you're wondering like, what the heck is this underscore thing? That's for translation stuff. It's an internationalization feature, and to make it short and sweet, it's conventionally imported as an underscore. You can probably even see it up here. Yeah, get text lazy imported. So rather than seeing get text lazy everywhere, everywhere there's a string that needs to be translated, it's put with this underscore version. So it's a function call that does translation. But I would expect this to work, right? Like here's the dictionary. It's got fields as the one key and a tuple after that. What's my version doing differently? Count models. Oops, no, admin. So I'm not bothering with translation here, which is why I didn't wrap anything with that underscore call. So that should be just a string. And then a dictionary immediately is the second element. What did I mess up? Flatten field sets. Too many values to unpack. Expected 2. Seemed right to me. I mean, it's obviously wrong, but it seemed right. So what am I missing? We could potentially go into this code and debug it, but that would be a pain. This is when you, so field sets should be a tuple itself. So what I'm trying to do is field sets is a tuple. And here, how about this? Let's go out of here. Make sure that I have this right. I'm going to copy all this stuff. We might have to do some goofiness, make that function call thing work. Let's open up the REPL, and let's define a function that takes some text and returns just the text, just so that it has to exist. So we've got that function, and then I'm going to paste in, oh, boo, come on, unexpected indent. Fine. All right. Maybe let's fiddle with this a little bit. Might be just because I had it. This whole thing was indented here, so it didn't like that. Paste here. Okay, there we go. So now this should work out okay because we've had that function defined, and it did. So if we call field sets, we can see it's a tuple of tuples. And let's come over here and let's take this code and do the same kind of thing. Yeah, it doesn't like that, so that's not what I wanted to do. So I want to set this to be like other. But I lost all that other stuff. Ugh, annoying. So we have other, and it's got extra, and we've got this whole line. And we should be able to close that off. So other should just be a tuple. Same thing, right? So my question is, or the way I approached this was I tried to add field sets plus this other thing, which would give me, oh, look at that. It is not what I thought it was. Notice what it did here. So it made, oh wow, okay. Really? So the type of other should be a tuple. Yeah. So, but when I added it, what it did is it like broke apart the tuple and put the constituent pieces inside of the field sets tuple. So what if we did field sets, knowing that it's going to do that, let's do field sets plus other as a single element tuple. This feels disgusting, but maybe it'll have the effect. All right, that is giving us the same layout that we would expect out of field sets, but that's a really gnarly aspect of Python there. So that was confusing. No wonder I was not getting it right. So how do we wrap that up? We could wrap that up by putting another set of parentheses around this thing, and then a comma, and then another parenthesis. Whew. I don't like how that looks at all. Future me is going to be mega confused. And that that comma right here, it all hinges on this one little comma. It's very tricky. But I think it's going to be right. Wow. Yep. It's right, but it looks weird. So then we get down to the bottom, and now we can see our new fields. Great. Gnarly. Hopefully that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions about what's going on here? Messing with tuples is tricky in Python sometimes. So I'm going to add these files to the stage. Let's check them out. And we're going to see, we've got our new, oops, I left a piece of junk in there. Let's get rid of this. This is why we review the diff. Who was asking me about that earlier? Eric? I don't know if you're still around, Eric, but this is why I do it. Or as a solo person, I spend a lot of time looking at these diffs that I just wrote. So we've got our custom version of the user admin that adds our new fields that map to our attributes that we got from the activator model. We've got the migration to go with it, and then we've got a mix-in, which I guess I didn't really describe what mix-ins are, but when you have, I should undo that change over here. When you have multiple inheritance like this, this is not strictly a mix-in because it is also a model, but it's an abstract model. So Django is able to mix them together. But a lot of mix-in classes are like, you want extra functionality on some class, and usually it's like totally separate functionality, like new methods or things. You'll see this a lot used with Django REST framework is really big on the use of mix-ins. And it's a way to add in these just extra features that you want. And by the nature of how Python composes classes together, you can create like a bunch of different new classes by mixing in all of these other attributes. So it's pretty powerful. All right, so we've got our new things. Actually, I should probably make sure that it all goes properly. And this is the one that we'll check with actual migrations. So everything's good. Time to say add soft delete ability. So this is nice, it's convenient. We can still just do delete, and it's not hooked up to that in any way. So a delete is still a delete. So I got to be careful with this. It's really deactivate is something that we'll have to do. Again, I'm kind of surprised. One of the aspects of this extension that I thought it would have is some ability to call deactivate that might set the deactivate dates or something like that, but it didn't seem to do that. It also didn't seem to set the activate date. So whatever. I'm gonna get some of that stuff's gonna come for free. Of like, if I'm only adding this to the user record, there's a date joined field that already exists on the user, so I don't need to set an activate date. That's kind of extra information, but there's no way to avoid it. Add soft delete ability to user, and this fixes what number? Fixes 23. All right, 2 things down. Let's see. Process the inbound email via a webhook. SendGrid configuration. What I put in here? Anymail. Okay. I mentioned last time that I wasn't going to read a bunch of documentation, like a ton of documentation online. That was true. I didn't. I went and read a bunch of the Anymail documentation. Anymail is the service that we'll use for sending. And then as I dug into it, I discovered some really cool aspects of this that might be extremely useful for our purposes. One is that it does integrate with the ability to receive mail. So there's some configuration we have to do about webhooks, but assuming that we do those, it does that processing. And there's probably things to read here about this stuff. Yeah, it looks like there's some warnings that I didn't read all these docs, but I read some of them in terms of processing. But if you think back, if you were here previously, I know some of you were, like John, I had a heck of a time thinking about how are we going to know what date a message goes with. So if the whole point of this journal is like if we send out prompt emails for saying, how was your August 2nd? And it comes back in, I said there's a bunch of different cases of it could come in the same day, it could come in a day later, it could be, we could mess up and delay when they're sending. And so how do we make sure that whatever the user is responding to, they're hitting reply, that we associate it properly with that journal entry? And there were a bunch of different ways to do this that we needed to consider. And as I looked at this stuff, there's some really powerful extra features. So let me pause. One aspect of Anymail is that it hooks into Django's regular send email interface. And so you can see that over here. We can look at this and we can see how there's a bunch of sections broken up here, but the main interface is this send mail call. And that's what we've been hooking into with the job that is actually sending out mail. And my concern with this approach is that it didn't seem like we had any flexibility for adding extra data. But I have since discovered through a little bit more reading that that's not true. If you call it this way, that is true in the fact that it's the single function with these just these bunch of attributes. But there are other ways to send email. And one other form, rather than using this send mail call, is to build up an email message like this email email multi-alternatives, what a mouthful. And you can then call send as an object method on it. And that at first that doesn't seem very useful, but then when you dig a little deeper, you can find that there is also an Anymail version of the message. And this is key to what might be useful for us, because what it can do is a number of things. After you hit send, it will attach to it this new attribute of Anymail status, I think, or Anymail. I mean, that was one of them, but there was another item in here. It's basically a new attribute that gets added to the message, and that tells you some things about the message in terms of your ESP. So one of those things was, if I can find it, this Anymail status. And the Anymail status acts as its own bucket of attributes that you can use. It can include stuff like this message ID, and then it can include the status of the email. So I think as well, not here. So that opens up a new potential avenue for how we're going to track these emails and make sure that the email that gets sent out and the one that gets received back are, we're able to correlate them to make sure that we're doing the right journal entry. So one approach that I thought about with this for changing the design is, I was saying earlier that it was going to be critical that we parse the subject line and get that right. But then I pointed out how there was a weakness in that strategy if somebody could just go fiddle the subject line and change the date and put in a new entry for a different date. So there's that weakness. But think of it this way. If we are able to instead get a message ID of what we sent to SendGrid, if on the return, like when somebody does the reply, we can look up and find out if there's an associated message ID that is attached to, then we have a very direct correspondence between the thing that we sent and the thing that we received. And at that point, at the time of sending, we know what journal entry it was supposed to be for. So we could, in theory, make a journal entry that has no content, that is hidden, and as a placeholder. Like we attach the message ID from SendGrid, so we know this entry at this was sent at this time, and we've got all of that history, so that there is a permanent record of these are the entries that were sent. So that is one way that we could wire this together. But it's not even the only way. There's another aspect of this that is you can apparently attach for certain ESPs extra metadata. So maybe we don't want to go with this message ID approach. Maybe it still feels a little like too connected to the ESP, the entry. And I can see a pretty valid use case or argument for that. But what if we sent along as a piece of metadata with the message an attribute that said something like journal entry date or something like that? If this entry date is then affiliated with this message and then the reply has the same metadata attached to it, we could look for the existence of this entry date aspect, parse that, and find out what was the intended date for this message that we sent. And that would be a really clear way to tie it to the entry that we need to create. So I think I'm probably leaning that way, truthfully, if we can, because I don't know, like from a pure modeling perspective, it doesn't make sense to me to say that an entry is specifically tied to an email message. Like that's how it's delivered. And so there's like maybe a foreign key aspect to it there, but it's not a strong relationship. What really is the logical relationship, again, is that entry date attribute. So I would feel more comfortable having those things be disconnected, especially if we, let's say, there's statuses with these things, and statuses could be that it was invalid or rejected, failed. There's all these failure states that could happen. So if we had to send another message, do we update the entry to include this new message ID? It starts to get pretty messy. Really, all I'm interested in is that somebody got their email and we attached what journal date it was supposed to be for, or what entry date it was supposed to be for. So that is my thought there. And the way to do that is then to use this like anymail email, or whatever they called it, anymail message, and then call it like you would with the email multi-alternatives version. And you can see they're adding some extra attributes with this metadata stuff. They call send, they get the status off later, and they check the message ID and all these other bits. So I don't know that we're already more than an hour and a half in, so I don't know that I have the energy to get through all of this. So I think what we'll do is, this is the place that I want to get to. So let's start with the anymail configuration, get through some of the basic steps of it, and maybe look at some of the SendGrid attributes that we need to, and then we can dig in later. I want to go do a little bit more research and make sure that I have confidence in the method, because what I don't want to have us do is waste a bunch of time setting some metadata and then only to discover that when we get the inbound request that we don't have the attributes back. That would be a big pain in the butt. So let's try that. Let's go to anymails, install stuff, and see if we can just get through the first couple steps, and then we'll call it an evening and then just have a setup for the next time. I won't be, I guess I should say, won't be streaming next week. I've got a Python meetup here in town. I will put out that recording if you want to watch it. It's interesting to see other people. It's going to be about mixing Jinja, the template engine, with business docs and like generating business documentation or something like that, which kind of useful, like a automate the boring stuff kind of mentality. So if you've ever read that book, so I'll post that up and then we'll get back to this in a couple of weeks. So let's start from the very beginning with Django-anymail and look at this and get through the documentation and get through the relevant pieces. Django-anymail works with a bunch of senders. So I happen to be using SendGrid, but you can use any of these things and it will work basically the same. And they all have different levels of support. Jeffrey, yeah, it'll be a talk that I record. I try and make recordings of all the Python Frederick stuff. In fact, if you not right now because you're watching the stream, but after the stream's over, you want to jump over and look at my YouTube account. There's a playlist and it's called like Learn About Python from Local Frederick Developers, and it's all of the Python Frederick presentations that we've ever recorded. I will note that the recording quality is substandard. It has decent audio, but my setup for doing recordings, it's not a big production. But if you want to learn something, there's good content. So I try and optimize for having decent audio and good content. Anyway, let's look at this. So you can go learn about all the stuff that Anymail can do. And here's the documentation. That's just table contents. So we're ready to get to it. We want to use Django-anymail with the SendGrid variety. Let's go to our requirements file. And we want to add up here Django-anymail with SendGrid. And I guess we need to check the package number on that. So Django, and it's possible that you folks may not have seen this bracket stuff. This bracket stuff is a way to do optional packages to include. So it's basically saying, I want Django-anymail, but I want the flavor that includes anything that's going to work with SendGrid. And so the documentation is showing, what was it showing? MailChimp? No, not MailChimp. It was showing Mailgun, but you substitute for the vendor you want to use. So we do SendGrid, and then we do version 10.1 is the latest version. Okay, and now we're ready to do the pip compile command again. We're going to get our new requirements file, and you can see Django-anymail depends on Django. It has one line for itself. It uses the request library, and it uses urllib3. So let's install it again. Single package. Okay, now we've got it installed. All right, again, it is another one that acts like its own Django app, so we need to include that as our Django app. Let's go over to the settings file, go to our list of installed apps, and come down here, and we'll put it after all auth and list it as Anymail. Okay, cool. Then we get to these attributes. We have to set some Anymail settings, and we've got email backend, and then we've got these two attributes as well. I believe that these are Django settings. So yeah, let's think about those in a minute. I've already got in here somewhere email backend. Ah, cool. So we know we need to replace this with the SendGrid one. In fact, let me go over to the homeschool app, and I know it's the same thing over here. So we're going to view inside view in inner quotes. We'll copy that over, come over to the settings file, change it, and paste. Oops, not wrong keystroke. So as a reminder, I try and set up my settings so that they will default to what we need for production, which means that I have to actively think about the development mode settings because I don't want to be trying to send email to SendGrid. So we've already done this in the past, but I'll make sure that it's present in the environment example file. So when we are doing this, in development mode, we're trying to use the Django core console backend. So that just gives us a mechanism to like see the emails get dumped right to the console and be able to click on activation links and that kind of stuff in the raw text form, and prevents us from accidentally using SendGrid for development unless we explicitly opt into it. So that's what that setting's for. We already included it, and email backend is going to show up later down here. We've got this email section. Now, I am going to probably move this stuff, now that I'm thinking about this a little bit more. Like, this email backend is a Django setting. And the way I treat this stuff is just like I do with the installed apps and my imports and everything else. I try and have Django settings at the top, third-party settings below that, and then a first-party settings for apps below, even below that. So this is not a Django setting. This is something I made up, so we're going to move this in a minute. Let's come down here and go after Django all auth and start a django-anymail section. We've got that, and then we've got anymail as this, and it's going to be a dictionary. And we're going to fill that with some values in a minute. So let's go back up to the email section, and we're probably going to want to delete this thing, but I'm not going to do it right now because I think it's not the right setting. I forgot about the fact that Django-anymail wants you to use specific settings that are provided by Django and expected by anymail specifically. So we now have this. We need to set up settings that are for our ESP. So Mailgun has these two settings, so we need to probably need to jump to supported ESPs and then jump to SendGrid and see what it asks for. So you can see this is documentation for this project is pretty killer. They do a good job of showing exactly what you need. So we're going to need a SendGrid API key is the piece that we're looking for. So I'm going to say right here, this will be SendGrid API key. And I need this to work, so we're not going to make it an optional thing, just like the other one. So we'll do the same thing, SendGrid API key. We don't define it in the environment up above. We just put it right here, and we'll set it that way. And since we're doing that, we need to come over here and say SendGrid API key equal fake API key as an example. And we can plug that in later. I also want to make sure that I don't mess up CI. So let's go over to the CI setup and add this here as well. So we'll say right here, SendGrid API key, and set it to fake API key. So all of that should allow GitHub Actions to continue to operate correctly. Yeah, and actually let's run the test, and we're going to see that it's going to break because I haven't actually set it in my env file. So it's looking for SendGrid API key. We put it in the example file here, but we haven't put it in the other one. Have I put anything secret into the other thing yet? I have a Sentry DSN, but as I've said in the past, it's not really a true secret. So I can show you this env file still. None of the rest of the stuff is secret. So now we've got that in place. We'll be able to run the tests again, and everything works. Okay, so I have not even pulled an API key yet. We're going to need that eventually. Maybe we want to test locally. I don't actually know how well that will even work. I don't remember if it was something that it expects to come from a certain domain and trusted sender. There's a bunch of stuff that has slipped my memory on how to work with this. But we've added the installed app. We have an email. Let's wrap this up for the evening. Yeah, by setting these things and looking at their configuration in Django. So let's go back to Django and look for, what was it called? Blah. My memory. Default from email and server email. Find out what those are about. Default from email. I mean, it probably is what it sounds like. So we want default from email. Okay. So webmaster at localhost is definitely not going to fly when we try and send this. So this is the default email address to use for automated correspondence from site managers, blah, 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 blah. This doesn't include error messages. For that, see server email. Okay. So I don't think this field is really going to matter. And the reason for that is when we send the emails out, I'm going to use the from field. I think this would allow me to ignore the from field when I'm constructing a message, but I don't know, I'd rather be explicit about setting the from field somewhere else rather than have it being this indirect setting. Maybe that's not necessary, but I want to populate this, I guess, is what it comes down to. So we've got the default from field, and I suppose we could put no reply at journeyinbox.com. And I can't remember, hold on. Server. Yeah, okay. Did the same thing with homeschool. So this is going to be that. And that's kind of that. But again, we're going to actually have replies. So this is not even the correct thing. Really what I want to use is this probably email SendGrid reply to for our processing job. The other thing that it had in here was this server email thing, which sends on error messages. Frankly, I want to turn that feature off, but we can set this value for completeness. So we'll set server email to be the same thing, no reply at journeyinbox.com. But there's a feature we definitely need to turn off. And to acknowledge that these are Django settings, I'm going to take them from here. We're going to go back up to the email area and put them right here. And I'm not going to fully alphabetically sort them because I want email backend to be the prominent thing on display here. But server email, that's a feature that we don't want. What happened? So what am I talking about? There's Django tries to be helpful, and it exists in a different, maybe a different time period where at the time where Django was released, tools like Sentry and Rollbar and these error management tools, exception handling tools, didn't really exist. So a way that you could handle this was to use email to actually send out errors. If there were exceptions that happened on the site, those would be logged and sent out as an email message. But this is not a great idea anymore here in 2023, especially when we already have exceptions going to Sentry. So the precondition for this line of thought is use an error tracker like Sentry or like Rollbar. And the reason these emails are, or one of the reasons these are not a good idea, is that you can really kill, you can find your domain name very quickly be kind of blacklisted as a spam sender. If it's sending out all this, like let's say you have a big problem on your site and it's constantly erroring and throwing exceptions. If you had a really bad one, like that's happening every 100 milliseconds or something like that, you could be sending out thousands of emails and find yourself in hot water with whoever you're sending email through, or find yourself with a big bill. And you don't want that. So what we want to do here is find a way to disable that feature. And I'm drawing a blank on the setting. There is a setting that exists to turn that off. Let's see if I have that for homeschool, because we definitely don't want it, but I don't remember what it's called. If any of you happen to know off the top of your heads, let me know. I will go look it up here if I can't find it in a second with the homeschool settings, but just thought I would check here first. So let's do a quick Google search. Google disable Django emails, error emails. Well, that's for logging. That's not. Maybe it's setting admins to something empty. Admins. Did I set admins in here? Is that how I did it? Nope. Maybe homeschool is like secretly configured. What the heck? Actually send out those emails, or maybe Sentry is like automatically disabling that functionality. That would seem even weirder. I don't think they'd do that. Man, why is this not coming? I thought this was a pretty easy thing to change. Got admins with an empty list. So let's search for that. Admins. Oh, it defaults to an empty list. Maybe if you don't have it set. A list of all the people who get code error notifications. When false and the admin email handler is configured, Django emails these people the details of exceptions. I wonder, maybe this changed. Maybe this used to be on by default and you had to do something, but now it's not a big deal. Okay, so that's good to verify. The fact that this is empty means that we're probably safe here and don't have to worry about sending. I don't even know where they would go to. Well, I guess that's the point of that admin setting. But that's who you could send stuff to if you wanted to. All right, let's return an email, make sure we can wrap this up for the evening. We've got those couple of settings from Django. I think the rest of it is trying to check out if it actually works, which we're not going to do this evening. There might be stuff that we have to configure on SendGrid side to get the API key. One of the challenges that we have with this, or I have, it's not really your problem, it's mine, is that the way SendGrid works and the way their account abuse policies work is because my SendGrid account happens to be connected to my personal email account. I'm not set up like a special Google account for all of this domain. They were able to detect that I was trying to create up a secondary account because I have a Gmail account. I was using one of those plus hacks. So it wouldn't let me do that. So I couldn't actually create 2 separate email accounts. So I've got one for School Desk, and then it's the same account that we're going to use for Journey Inbox here. So I don't know if there's work that I need to do to separate, like have different API keys for each app so that I can keep track of them differently. That would be my preference. But I have to dig into that. But I'm going to do that probably offline. So the next thing that we need to set here is most likely just that SendGrid API key if I want to test it out. So that's that. So we've done the, let's see, what else is left with this? We've done the basic configuration. Basic config. Then I feel like it's done. We need to verify it. So that would be a good test. Let's see if we can send ourselves an email. Verify with a sample email. And see how that goes. It may not, well, I don't know. If we have the API key, it should work. I don't know why it wouldn't. It doesn't have to be coming from the domain because the service sending it is not going to be coming from the domain. It's going to be in some kind of Heroku scheduled worker job. So that's not a big deal. So maybe that's it. And then we can look at the more interesting parts of the SendGrid stuff with the receipt of stuff and any kind of DNS records that we have to set up and that kind of thing. So we'll leave it at that for now. And to finish this all off, I want to make sure that the tests are passing. We're really not changing much here. And let's check out what we did add. So we added the SendGrid API key to the example. We've added it to the CI flow. We changed the email backend to make a production ready setting. Added the app, updated the Django settings that we needed to, added our anymail section, and added the actual package. That all looks good to me. So let's add that and we'll say configure django-anymail. And this doesn't complete the one we're working on, but it's for number 10. Gets us just a good step closer. Okay, cool. I'll push that up. So next time, again, this will be a couple weeks from now because I've got a meetup next week. But next time we'll try and work on some more interesting configuration of, I wonder if there's stuff we could do to even like test out the receiving stuff. There's some interesting tools out there. One of them is called ngrok. So ngrok is a way to do kind of a local tunnel so that we could, in theory, set up our webhook to receive inbound email and set up ngrok as the receiver using the SendGrid webhook web URL configuration and test it out. See if we can actually get something locally, process it, see how that works even before we deploy to something Heroku. I don't know if that will work or not. There might be barriers in the way because there might be some domain verification stuff that wants to happen, but we can try. And if we can do that, if we can prove that we can send stuff out, that will give us confidence that our job that's supposed to do the sending will work. And then we can also check on the getting stuff in. And then we should as well look into that metadata attribute stuff that I commented on, because it would be really good to attach the entry date to both the outbound and then confirm that we get it inbound too. That'd be a big win for our ability to process these things. Okay, so that's going to call it for the evening for me. If you don't mind giving a thumbs up on the stream, that's really useful. If you have any comments that you want to chat with me offline, you're willing to, you can certainly do that on this YouTube stream video, or you can go to join my Discord. So there's a Discord server. If you go to mattlehman.com and look in the upper corner, there is a little icon that will allow you to join the Building SaaS with Python and Django Discord. Pretty small community of people there, but we answer questions, and I try and help people out when I'm not streaming live. So with that, I'll thank you all for joining in. Oh, I guess, final thing. If you want to support me on Patreon or here on YouTube, you can. I've got stuff set up to do financial stuff. So if that means a super chat, because that's what you can do, or if you're able to support me regularly on Patreon or regularly as a member here on YouTube, I'd be super grateful. Hopefully the things that I'm offering are teaching you something, and I just appreciate those who are able to contribute. So that's it for real. Thank you for joining in. Take care.